I haven't heard anything about it.
Powerful place.
I know! Are you kidding? Did you already see it? I don't know where. No.
So good though. Like that. Drops in the middle of the store. I go into some else and go
Related never.
Hello everyone, welcome. Welcome to California Historical Society. Thank you so much for being here. How many of you guys have been here before? Okay, so a few people. Welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everybody who's new who's here, which is really exciting too. You can have a battle of the bands with people who've been here or visited for the first time. But we're so glad to have you. Part of the reason why we're doing this program and all the programs related to the Chicano Movement and muralism is the exhibit you're sitting in right now, which is the Murales Rebeldes show, which focuses on 8 Los Angeles murals that were whitewashed, censored, and destroyed. So after the program, if you still have time, please look around the gallery. It's really powerful. It's a beautiful show. And when we were planning the programs, we were thinking, what are the bridges between these two cities? And women in muralism and the Chicano movement also played a huge role in producing public art in San Francisco and Los Angeles. So when Susan Cervantes actually proceeded to she's like, you've got to get the Murales Muralistas here. And then I was like, oh, okay. She shared all the information and she helped get me connected. So I'm so grateful to her and grateful to everybody for being so kind and generous with your time, flexible, thoughtful. And I'm excited to hear the great conversation you're about to hear tonight. And part of a really powerful conversation is who you have as your moderator. And Terry Romo is going to be your moderator tonight. She is a professor, Chicano Studies, UC Davis, writer, thinker, probably moderator on the side, but does many things in her life, in her career, and many of you probably know her already, but we're so grateful to have her. Adam Hirschfelder, who used to work here, he really wanted to work with you again, so he was so excited. He's like, you got her, and I was like, I did, but it was not that hard. So, but I'm really, really grateful to her and to everybody here. Everyone's been so lovely. I've learned so much so far, and I'm so excited for everyone to learn tonight. So, I'm going to hand it over to Terry, but know that we do more programs. We've got a powerful one next week about One Alicia, talking about art and feminism. That's on Wednesday. Then in August, we have Edith Boone here, talking about her life and muralism. And then in September, we're going to do a program about Plaka, about Bobby Alley. And and that history with Wade Patlan, and Patricia's coming back for that. So come back for all of those amazing programs. So if you have any questions about programs, got a great suggestion or thought for me, please let me know. I'm really open to suggestions, and sometimes those suggestions come into the real program. So I'm going to hand it over to Terry now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patty. Is this loud enough? Because I want to make sure I'm not blasting everybody, but I'm loud enough for everyone to hear. Okay, this is good. I want to thank Patty and the California Historical Society for inviting me to participate on this very inspirational panel. And I want to make sure to thank all of you who came out for this panel, because I know that sometimes we all have different things to do, and especially in San Francisco where you can be pulled in a million directions. So I'm very glad that you're here to hear this wonderful panel, and you're not going to be disappointed. I've had the great privilege of doing research and writing about the Mujeres Muralistas, so I'm very especially gratified that they're getting now more attention, because for me it's like history gets written and sometimes we pay attention and then it just disappears. And I'm glad that we're having this opportunity to talk about the great accomplishments of the group and each of the individual artists that made it up. And even though the Murales Rebeldes exhibition that Patty talked about is focusing on destroyed murals of Los Angeles, as many of you know, we've had our own bout with destroyed murals here in San Francisco, and unfortunately, most of the Mujeres Muralistas murals are no longer in existence. And we do have the one at the little mini park on 24th Street in the Mission, so if you want to see what is, I think, the last remaining mural of the Mujeres Muralistas, you can go there. It's called Fantasy for Children. As soon as you walk in, it's to the left. It's a large mural. You won't be disappointed, so you should check that out. A seminal group of Bay Area and Chicana and Latina Chicana muralists, they came together, as some of you know, in the 1970s and changed the course of Chicano art. And this research I've done has substantiated that. However, I want to make sure that all of you know that they were not just the first Chicana collective muralists, but they were the first women's collective to do murals. So for me, that's an important part, to recognize them as part of American art, because they are the only group that I've ever been able to find any research or substantiate in terms of my studies that there was not another female mural collective before the Mujeres Muralistas. So I think that's an important point to also bring up. My apologies, I'm dealing with allergies, so hopefully won't get too much into the problem. Now, some of you know, and I wanted to provide a small little bit of a historical context, the Chicano art movement evolved out of the Chicano Movement, and we don't have a lot of time to go through all of that, but I do want to say that it was a time when artists joined other cultural workers, other activists, and became part of this larger movement for social equality and to, really attack a lot of the issues that were going on at that time, not only with Chicanos, but African Americans, Asian Americans, and Native Americans. And as part of that, they wanted to bring those statements to a large public, and so posters and murals became that main medium for a lot of the artists. And so at that time, the murals were very important in terms of getting these messages out. Now, initially, murals were painted by individual artists, but then obviously because of all the work that's involved, you needed more than just one person doing this. So it became very much an art form that required a lot of artists to participate. But unfortunately, the Chicano movement, which called for this ethnic and racial equality, fell short in terms of gender equality. And so that's why the Mujeres Muralistas are even more important, because they brought to the forefront that issue of you can't have racial equality without gender equality as well. So they very much made that point and did it in a certain way with the aesthetics that also changed Chicano art forever. And then I might make the case that they then developed their own Latina aesthetics and imagery, and that also contributed greatly. And hopefully you're able to pick up on that with these slides that are behind us, which we're not going to be able to address individually, but you'll be able to see them over the course of our conversation. So with that, for our participants so we can get into the discussion. At my far right is Patricia Rodriguez, and she was born in Marfa, Texas, but she has been in the Bay Area off and on since the mid-1960s. And she received her BFA from the San Francisco Art Institute and the MA degree from Sacramento State in 1975. Rodriguez has taught many at many colleges and universities, including San Francisco State and UC Berkeley, where she created a course on Chicano art, and that was one of the very first courses on Chicano art in 1977. She was the curator at the Mission Cultural Center for Latino Arts here in San Francisco from 2001 to 2009. And she is currently working with children and families at the Richmond Arts Center, as well as various Alameda County libraries. And throughout her career, Rodriguez has continued to do her personal artwork, focusing on prints, mixed media, box constructions as well. And next to her is Esther Hernandez, and she was born in California's San Joaquin Valley to a Mexican Yaqui farm worker family. And after graduating from UC Berkeley in 1976, she repeated San Francisco and is best known for her depiction of Latina and Native women through her pastels, prints, and installations. She's been in numerous national and international solo and group shows, and her work is included, among other places, the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Library of Congress, and then also here at the Legion of Honor, as well as the National Museum of Mexican Art in Chicago, and then also the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Irene Perez, next to me, was born and continues to live in Oakland, and she studied illustration at the Academy of Art here in San Francisco and printmaking at the San Francisco Art Institute. Perez, in 1993, participated as a muralist and collaborator on the San Francisco Women's Building called Maestra Peace, which if you haven't seen, please make sure to see it. And her prints and paintings have been exhibited throughout San Francisco Bay Area as well as nationally and in Mexico. So now we're going to begin with some questions, and I think we're going to kind of follow a format of giving you more general context of what was going on during the time that they first got together, and then going through and talking about the two key murals that they worked on, and then following up with where they are now in terms of their art making, and what kinds of projects that they're working on as well, so you get a sense of what's happening with them right now. So I'd like to start with, and maybe have be Patricia and then Esther and Irene, if you could each talk about why you came to San Francisco, and also could you give us a sense of what the art scene was like in the Bay Area at that time that maybe drew you in to come and be part of it.
Hi, I came to San Francisco in, I think it was 1970. I actually was living in Oakland, and I got a scholarship at the San Francisco Art Institute. The doors were beginning to open for minorities, especially because of the civil rights movement and the Chicano Movement. So the universities were opening their doors because a lot of times we went and applied and we wouldn't get in. So all of a sudden we were able to apply and get into the Art Institute. And there was a whole group of us that got in from the Mission District, and included the men and the women. And that was my beginning. And I was so happy to be able to go to the Art Institute because that was a dream come true actually for me. Coming from Texas and landing in Ventura County where I grew up, and then wanting to go to college, and my parents said, no, you're not going to college, you're going to get a job, you're going to go to work. I said, no, I want to go to college. I said, women don't go to college. You're going to get a job. And I said, well, I'm going to go to college. And I am going to get a job, and I'm going to pay with my babysitting money, and I'm going to college. And that's how I got started. So after that, I can answer other questions.
Well, like Dana said earlier, I was raised and grew up in a small little farming town in the central San Joaquin Valley. actually it was called Chinatown, which was a whole other story. But I first explored the world around me, like in the fields. And so I got my first taste and my love for creating art. But there aren't a lot of opportunities out in the countryside. So I landed up heading over to the big bad city, like every other runaways that come to reinvent themselves here. And needless to say, it was fabulous. It was like totally wild. Hippies, you name it, it was all going on. Free love, free sex, no bras, the whole bit. What more could you ask for, really? But I quickly sort of caught up with the Chicano Latino community, and one thing led me to another, and I eventually landed up meeting with the Mujeres Muralistas through an exhibit at Galeria de la Raza. So that's it, just in a nutshell. What's going on?
Well, well, I grew up in the San Francisco, Oakland Bay area. So I didn't know what the whole thing was all about, people coming to San Francisco. What's going on? You know? But I did move to, when I was living in Oakland, I had my ex-brother-in-law, Miguel Rios, was attending the Academy of Art. And so he helped me actually get into the Academy of Art with showing my portfolio. And eventually I started to work for the Academy of Art on a working scholarship, since I came from not a family with a bunch of resources. So I was very lucky to do that. So it brought me to San Francisco to go to the Academy of Art. Back when it was on Sutter Street, it was just it was 3 stories, and I just remember it was, I thought it was big time, oh my God, But anyway, I wanted to be a commercial artist. I wanted to illustrate. And that's why I was there at the Academy of Art until I ran into the Chicano art movement. And so, but that's literally what brought me. And I eventually went to the Art Institute, where I did meet, Yanez was very instrumental in getting scholarships for us, and that was cool because I didn't have to pay for the school then, But unfortunately, it was discontinued just on my last year, and I wasn't able to get a degree. And I said, well, Charlie, I have to go to work. I have to pay the rent, So I never pursued it anymore as far as getting a degree. So
That's a good segue to talking about the Chicano movement during the 1970s, when you were coming to San Francisco, or you were already here, but you're coming to into the Chicano movement. If you could talk a little bit more about the scene at that time, because we know the Galeria is in existence, there's other things going on, the UFW has a major presence here at the time. If maybe you can talk about how each of you got involved with the Chicano movement and why.
I finally went to school. I went to Merritt Junior College against all odds, and began to find out about the Chicano movement. And I was drawn into meetings, I was drawn into demonstrations, and realized that we had a right as women, a right as Chicanos to actually go and look for our goals. And so the Chicano movement was really important in the sense of giving us strength, especially as a woman. I think it was really important for me to see that there was doors that were open. Because I was conditioned that there were no doors for women, that you had to either get married or you had to go to work, right? So, but the Chicano movement presented something else. It presented an opportunity to speak up and fight for your rights. So that was really an important thing. And through that, I think I learned a lot from looking at more doors opening up and being stronger. And I think there was all kinds of incredible to Cultural Center. There were radical groups all over the city. So everybody had something to do with freedom, justice for all at that time. It was really wonderful to be part of that.
Right about when I was leaving the San Joaquin Valley is when the Farm Worker Union sort of was on their major walk to Sacramento. And in our small little farming town, we waited for them, although the streets were lined with police dogs, sheriffs, police of all sorts were there. We still went. And for me, it was a real turning point in my life, and it sort of paved the way for like the rest of my life. Because I remember seeing the Teatro Campesino, and they had all these banners and sort of portable murals, and they were doing all these plays and all of that, and I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And it was the first time that I'd ever seen art being used in that way, because up until that time, and even to this day, I was more interested in portraiture of my family and friends. So when I came to the Bay Area, I landed up in the East Bay also, and I met up at one of what was called Grove Street College, which was really wild. The Panthers were there, you name it, everybody was there. It was a party. But we were serious too, taking care of business on all different levels, and that's where I met Manapies Montoya and learned about screen printing and muralism in terms of, because we didn't have access to the media, that I learned through them and other people that this was a medium, an important medium, and I sort of developed an interest and went from there in the school and in the community.
Wow, I'm thinking about the 70s, early 70s. I was in high school, and there was, I guess, an announcement or a call for artists, and it was just the beginning. I think maybe that's where I really got my introduction to the Chicano art, and there was an organization, actually, it was actually Renee Yanez who was part of it, and they called out to artists to say, come and do, present your artwork, you could win money, and I go, money? So I went for it, and I did a drawing, and apparently I won first prize and got some money. And I said, ooh, okay, I think I like this. And so that's where I just decided, but I think all along I felt like an artist, especially I think when the early 60s, the demonstrations, the indie art, the psychedelic stuff, that really attracted me, Whoa. Okay. So back then in Oakland, not much was happening, but it was, this small group, and I think they were called La Causa de la Raza or something. They had a house, and that's where I submitted the drawing, and from there I kind of took off and was able to get into the Art Institute. And I mean, not the Art Institute, excuse me, it was Academy of Art. And there I thought, because I won $50, I thought, oh my God, I can do commercial art, make some more money here. So that's where I was headed. I was really headed into commercial art. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot in the Academy of Art. I learned a lot of technique and a lot of the secrets and stuff, doing illustrations, and it wasn't until I moved to San Francisco. I did move into San Francisco in the early 1970s. My sister was leaving San Francisco, and her and her husband, they were going to go move to Europe, and I was going to take over their place. And that's where I met Graciela. Again, Renee Yanez. He's coming up. But I was like really impressed with Graciela Carrillo. I was like, wow, she's pretty. And she's like, so animated. She was the first person I saw as the female Chicana, artist that had a feminine, perspective that I was going, yeah. I was really, really attracted attracted to, it was different. It was different, you know, at that point. I think in the early 70s, I think the Chicano movement was very male-centric, you know. And to my eye, I thought, where are we? Where are we? You know, where's the mujeres? Where's the women? Where's the mamas? So anyway, that's where I really had to begin.
And that gets us to, I wanted to make sure that we acknowledged the other members of the Mujeres Muralistas who unfortunately are not able to be with us, but when it was formed in 1974, as Irene mentioned, Graciela Carrillo was one of the members, and you'll see her pictured in one of the group shots there, as well as Consuelo Mendez, who was from Venezuela, and she returned to Venezuela. So she's not able to be with us. And then Irene Perez and Patricia Rodriguez. And then over the course of the Mujeres Muralistas, it was joined by Esther, who you met today, and then also Novell, Miriam Olivo, and then also Tuti Rodriguez. So these were other artists that also participated as the Mujeres Muralistas on different projects. So with that, and also because all of you mentioned, when you first came here and when you first thought about being artists, you were interested in illustration, and then, Esther was doing prints. Patricia, I know you were doing, paintings and also box constructions. So here's a time period when murals are very much going up everywhere, but as you said, men were the only ones that you saw were being artists. So maybe you could talk about why did you choose muralism then? Because you didn't obviously have anybody to say, oh, I can do this, because there was nobody else doing it. And I think it would be really good to talk about why murals, and then why come together to do them, and how that came about.
Wow. At the Art Institute, once we got into the Art Institute, I wanted to major in painting, but it was minimalism that they were teaching. That's a white canvas with a black dot. And I looked at my professor and I said, he would stand in front of these paintings that he did, and he would just, oh my God, these are beautiful. Can you see the energy in this? It's gorgeous. And we went, oh my God, what is he talking about? Is he on acid? And I said, I was here because I'm a colorist. I want to paint. I want to do color. And they were not interested in my work. In fact, one of them came out to me and said, he crossed his arms and says, who do you think you are? Diego Rivera? Oh. And I looked up at him and I said, sir, who's Diego Rivera? I sincerely did not know, okay? I was not educated. We never read books, right? We were young. And he says, you don't know what Diego Rivera is? He says, you go out to the library right now. Now. And I said, no, I'm painting. He says, well, I was painting a canvas. I never knew I was going to be a muralist, but my canvas was 6 feet long by 5 feet wide. 5 feet high and 6 feet long. And it was a piata, but it was a mother from the barrio holding up her son who had been shot. And so that's why he questioned me, right? So I went up to the library and I cried when I finally looked at the book of Diego Rivera. I was sobbing, and I went up and I found him just before he left for lunch. He was coming out of lunch when he was leaving, and I pulled on his shirt. I said, sir, I am Diego Rivera. I'm Mexican, and I paint in color only, and I'm not going to change my art. He says, oh, you know who you are? 12 paintings by the end of the semester. I don't know if that's true. And one more tip. Towards the end of the course, I want to mention this. The same professor comes up to me and taps me on the shoulder. He's got a magazine. He says, I want to talk to you. And I said, oh God, now what did I do? And he says, I want to know why you're in the New Republic from Washington, D.C.
Yes.
He said, I worked all my life, I struggled, I've been through hell and back, and I've never gotten into the Washington Post, the Republic. And I said, well, I don't know. And it was about the first murals we were starting to do in the community, and the fact that they were political, that they had something to do with, especially the freedom of women. And he was just appalled that I, a student of color, had gotten into the magazine.
Diego would be proud of you. Well, I was in the East Bay, kicking around there, and landed up being recruited to one of the colleges over there, and they were doing murals, so I had a chance to sort of get a little taste of it, and I was really impressed with the scale, and also the fact that it was nonverbal, and that it was reaching out to the community like in a different way. It was like a public gallery, and those things really turned me on, especially after seeing the Teatro Campesino and the impact that they were making throughout the San Joaquin Valley and the country and the world eventually. But anyway, I landed up going to UC Berkeley. No, then I got invited to a show at the Galeria, and I met Irene, Patricia, and Graciela, Consuelo, and Hola, comadres, and met sort of the whole diaspora of Latina women, urban, rural, Venezuela, Boricua, Central American, Jewish Latina. It was like, what? And it was really blew my mind. And so we were part of the first probably all women's exhibit at Galeria de la Raza. It was actually a real bonding moment for, I think, especially for me, because I never really met any other Chicana women artists. So, pardon?
Let me correct you. What year was that?
1974.
Okay, 1970, we were students at the Art Institute, and we asked Renee Yanez for a one-woman show, a women's show at the Galeria. He says, no, we've never heard of that. You can't have a show. So this was the very beginning of us really fighting for the rights of women showing. And he finally gave us a show, and he says, nobody's going to come. There's no such thing. There's no women out there. So this was when the Galeria, before it moved to 21st Street. And then when we had an opening, I think we had like 300 people show up.
But in that respect, I just want to acknowledge the passing of Renee Yanez. It was like an extremely important person in our community. And somebody who, maybe at first he didn't want to open the doors to women, but he was one of the men that was very, very supportive. Change it. Okay, where did I leave off? Anyway, so I really, meeting the Mujeres Muralistas was a major turning point in my life. It was like an extremely rare opportunity, something I never would have learned in the schools or university, because I landed up going to UC Berkeley. Meeting these women of these diverse backgrounds, with just like a real wide range of skills. And everybody sort of wanting to do work for the community, even though we were coming from all of these different perspectives. So it was an amazing, like I say, turning point that sort of has fed me to this day in terms of the spirit of the movement of the Mujeres. Hola de chingonas.
That exhibit on 14th Street, right? Okay, yeah, that was, I think, the first Chicana, women's show that the Galeria de la Raza, put together, right? So, just getting back to, I guess, why I got involved, and again, it still comes back to Graciela Carrillo, because she was really the only person actually in the infrastructure of the Galeria de la Raza that was really pushing for women's artwork. I really didn't feel that strongly on Renee Yanez really excited about, really pushing women as artists at that time, okay? I think it changed, right? So, fortunately for all of us, yes, he did change, and it was a struggle. You know, again, Patricia mentioned, you know, it was not only the establishment that we were sort of trying to become part of this movement, it was also within the movement. So I just remember that it was Graciela who seems to be also another pivotal person in actually opening the doors for us. And as a matter of fact, it was her. She did have a solo show eventually at the Galeria de la Raza once they were on 24th Street. And I remember back then, after the women's show, and I think that's when I first met Esther in this, the women's show at the Galeria, right? The Galeria was on 24th Street. But I do remember that it was, Graciela had a solo show at the Galeria de la Raza, Mrs. Graciela Carrillo. And it was at that point that Consuelo Mendez, I remember her speaking to me. She says, you know what, I really want to work with you. And I've seen your work now, I really want to work with you. And I have this mural that I've been commissioned to do. And that turned out to be the Latina America mural. And it was, I think, also her that actually created, was part of, pivotal, person that also created the Mujeres Muralistas. And so I just wanted to make that very clear that, I think it was also these very two strong women that had really took charge, and we kind of like, okay, let's move, let's do our own thing, I think that's what happened, It wasn't until we were getting in the papers and we got all this attention, and Ralph Madriaga, who was also a director of the Galeria, co-director of the Galeria, I think he was much more supportive with the Mujeres Muralistas. And as a matter of fact, he named us Mujeres Muralistas, and that's how we got our name. So I just want to give, these people, a shout out, since like Consuelo Mendez and Graciela Carrillo are unable to be here.
I just wanted to say one more tidbit. I forgot the question that it was asking. How do we get started? We were so frustrated with the minimalist thing at school that we also worked part-time through the Art Institute. And I was working for Jamestown Catholic School. And the priest comes up to me and says, "You're an artist, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I'm an art student." He says, "Well, why don't you paint me a mural on this wall here?" And I said, "You got any money?" And he says, "No, well, the church has no money." And I looked up to him and I said, "The Catholic Church, the most richest church in the world, has no money? I don't understand." And he says, "Well, we don't have a budget for this kind of thing." I said, "Well, how do you want me to paint the mural?" And he said, "Well, you know how to do it. You can get paint." I said, "No, I can't do any of that." I said, "You pay us, and you give me the paint, and I'll think about it." So he said, okay, I'm going to think about it. And I went away, and I was still a student at the Art Institute. So my job was helping other artists become community workers in the institutions around the mission. That was my secretarial work from the Art Institute. I was getting paid to do that. That's how I ended up over there. So when I showed up again to the job, he had tons of gallons of paint, brushes, primer, and he says, "Will you do it now?" And I said, "Well, how much are you going to pay me?" "We can't pay you, but we'll give you all the material." We were so desperate. I went back to the Art Institute. I asked Graciela, I asked Irene, I asked Consuelo, "We have a project in the community, let's get out of here." And that's how we started doing murals.
Well, I think this is a good time to now talk about the first project that Eden had mentioned, because I think a lot of people have seen images, and we do have some images that flashed on the Latin America. And I know at some point it was also called Pan America, so I've heard references to that. So if you hear that, that's the same mural. But if you can talk about, because that's obviously the very first big project that you all work on, and you worked in a very distinctive style that other muralists did not use, and the imagery, which was very different from what the male muralists were painting. So if you can talk about that, and then also para el mercado, which was your next big project at Paco's Tacos, to be able to kind of talk about, because that also extended that imagery even further, and kind of, it was sort of your trademark imagery after that. So maybe you can talk a little bit about those two big projects, because I know those are the two big ones you're known for. You want to start?
Okay. Well, I remember like, this was like, for me, it was the first time I did a major project with other muralists. I had done another mural at Bombing Alley before. Before we did the Latina America, which is also known as Pan America and Latino America. I'm calling it now the Latina America. I declared that. When Consuelo, I think at the time when she approached me, and I said, well, yeah, approach Patricia. She goes, yeah, she also recruited Patricia Rodriguez and Graciela Carrillo at the time. I think one of the things that we didn't really have that, I don't know, I guess the support of the male muralists, but we found out we had Emmylou Packard. She was at this time living in the Mission District. She had a studio, and she also worked and painted with Diego Rivera. And I'm going, I at this point, I don't even know who she is, and I think speaking with her, she really, helped us to technically put a big monumental mural like this, because I think we've all done like little small spaces, small walls, but as a big collective and a huge, this was like a 2-story, 50 feet, maybe 75 feet long, so you guys can see it.
77 feet long.
And, it was big, and so she helped us really in technical terms and how to deal with it. And I was like very technical, okay, I get it, I got it, I think she kind of, for me, I think she kind of introduced us, or me, to the Chicano, because she worked with Diego Rivera. First time I heard of Diego Rivera. I mean, I've heard of him, but not Frida Kahlo, And then I think from there on, I'm going to bring up Graciela Carrillo, because I think she just took up her persona. She just kind of went, oh yeah, So, and that was one of the other, I think, connections that I had, was beginning to uncover, remember, discover, whatever, in our culture, going back to our culture, our ancestral lands. I forgot what else I was saying here. No. That was my, I remember just that being very impressive, meeting Emmylou Packard back at that time. And to have that connection, actually, a connection all the way to Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, it's just amazing.
Okay. Well, when I first connected up with the Mujeres on the wall, we were already sort of developing the wall. I was in school, I had a young son, And I started hanging out. Before they knew it, they had me helping them out, assisting, and which was just totally an amazing event. And being with such a strong group of women was really intense because there was a lot of issues that had to be resolved. And in some way, I felt like coming from a big family of very strong women was very helpful. Because, yeah, you know, you had everybody and their mama and your grandma had an opinion, but still you had to get a job done. So somehow or another, people's different ideas and ways of working and styles and all of that were respected, and it came together. And to me, that was like a really wonderful, beautiful experience. And then later on, I had a chance to get my own sort of space, so to speak, when we landed up doing the rhomboidal parallelogram or something like that for the, yeah, which was, yeah, right up there. And then I had a chance to talk about my farm worker background. And anyway, so that was an amazing opportunity. I went on to UC Berkeley, and I landed up working with Carlos Ruarca, who was creating murals there, and he introduced me to the use of, what was there? The projectors and stretching things out. But nevertheless, I kept in touch with the Mujeres Muralistas, and I remember working on the Tacos Tacos mural with Graciela, I think it was you or?
In
Consuelo. And I think there was very little money, but we were paid with like all the fries we could eat. Yeah, so we were paid with food. And at that point, none of us had any money, so that was okay.
Just feed us to keep going. Yes, a lot of the murals that we did had to do with what we asked the community. It was really important for us to do the research and spend a lot of time in the library digging up information. Panamerica mural had to do with everybody who lived in the mission and where did they come from and what kind of culture was it. There were the Mayans, there were the coming from Mexico, there were people, workers that were coming from all over the place, and Afro-Latinos. And so we started putting up symbolism, historical symbolism, such as the devil from Venezuela, or, you know, the things like that that represented the mission. So a lot of the research for the murals had to be well thought out in the sense that we didn't just speak about ourselves, but we spoke about who's in this community, what is the culture about, the research that we did. I lived in Balmy Alley, which is now famous. And if you will go through Balmy Alley in the mission, you get to see all the murals. Well, I was part of that. And I lived there almost 20 years. And I had 2 garages with a big studio at the bottom and a table, a big table like this. And everybody had keys, and there was always food in the refrigerator. So if you came home from work or needed to finish a drawing, you could have a sandwich and you can continue working. And everybody we already had a panel all gridded, and you just put in according to an inch on your paper was a foot on the wall. So we had everybody doing inch drawings and putting them onto the piece of paper, and then we discuss them, and then we put them in automatically. We also had to go up on the scaffolding and grid the whole wall, and then start drawing it. So we learned by asking, by reading, by asking other muralists how it was, because the guys weren't really helpful. They saw us as competition. And so they would tease us, they would taunt us, get off the scaffold, you know, you're not going to finish. Your nails are going to get dirty. Things like that were always happening. So anyway. Yes.
So I wanted to ask about, because I think it's important to recognize the historical significance of what you did, but sort of, if you can talk from your own perspective, also what you think your legacy is going to be as the Mujeres Muralistas and your individual contributions to it, because I think it's important not for us to just sort of do it from the outside, but I mean, I think would be very interesting to hear. What do you see as that legacy for the Mujeres Muralistas and the part they played in it?
Being a teacher and a professor at the university, one of the things that I saw was that there's very little, especially when I started going to the university, there was very little about the ethnic groups, the Chicano Movement, about our own culture. So whenever we do things like this in the community, it's to improve ourselves, it's to encourage young people to also begin to look at their own culture, where they're coming from. Who are they? You're Mexican American, but where's your ancestors from? I don't know. They live down the street, but we don't know where they came from. So the idea here is education to the community. So our murals had always had to do with the culture of who we were in the Mission District. Where do we come from? What is legendary? What is wonderful that's in books? We did a lot of research. We spent a lot of time looking at things in books. And that was what the legacy was, I think, for us. And the fact that we were women. The fact that we were women doing this research and putting it out to the community and encourage other young people to jump in. Who are you? Where you come from? What is your culture? What colors do you like? Things like that. And I think that's part of what I contributed to. And I'm sure all of us have.
Well, I think it's up to the younger people to be able to tell us that. And fortunately, I bumped into like a lot of kids, and I'm very grateful to all of you teachers out there who have taught the young people about art in the community. But I would say it's kind of, you know, it's a cliche, maybe si se puede, but I think it's a testament, the Mujeres Muralistas is a kind of a testament to the power of women or people in general working collectively, and also particular to the women, to not letting anything stop you or get in your way of finding your own voice, you know, whether it's family, partners, fear of rejection, the scale of projects that the Mujeres Muralistas really left a legacy in terms of a body of work, even though it's, I still consider most murals ephemeral. But it's still thanks to people like Anis Jacoby and who else is the other person? Maria Ochoa, who wrote a book about the women's collectives, the Mujeres Muralistas and the Comadres from Sacramento. They, I think, have really kept the story alive, and in general, I really think we're still kind of a footnote. In terms of art history, and well, I guess hopefully there are some writers and people out there who can sort of keep the story going and give it life and form on another level. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that if it wasn't for, I think, the women that were available to us, I guess back in the early 70s, that were supportive. I don't think the Mujeres Muralistas would have survived. I'm saying this because, you know, if it wasn't for Annie Lou Packard, you know, and also I wanted to mention Mia Galvez, who back in the early 70s, she had a organization that she was working with. I'm trying to remember the name, something place.
24th Street Place.
24th Street Place.
Tutorial Center.
It was a tutorial center. Thank you, Martha. As a matter of fact, Martha Estrella was part of the group. And she was one of the first, and her and Mia were one of the first people. As a matter of fact, she worked really hard in organizing the people, the neighbors at the Mommy Alley to get permission for us to paint murals. And that was the very first mural that I did. And I just wanted to shout this out.
Yeah.
You know, make sure everybody. And again, if it wasn't for these fabulous women, I mean, I don't know, we might have drowned widow who was in a sense a very sort of kind spirit, that she still remains a spirit, you know. Unfortunately, she's not with us in this world, but she is. She's still here walking around, but she's not really in the world. And I strongly feel that, you know, maybe it took a toll on her. It took a toll that, you know, she was willing to work with these men, with the men in our community, and I think, you know, it took a toll on her. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, Graciela Carrillo and Consuelo Mendez, I mean, they were just some fabulous, you know, strong women, and I'm so fortunate, and I feel fortunate to have met, you know, also Patricia Rodriguez, who on her own, and she's a dimo, you know, and also Esther Hernandez, who was, you know, pivotal too in encouraging me to stay, you know, and also continue to do our work in the community. So I just wanted to shout out to, you know, definitely all these women, and again, if it, you know, maybe Latina America, it might not have happened, you know, if it wasn't for all these strong women and Ralph Madriaga from the La Raza back in this early dark ages, 70.
Well, I think those are good observations, but I think you also need to recognize about how more impactful your influences were, because I know that in my research I found out, you know, that there was a group of women from Sacramento that went to San Diego to paint murals on the pillars, you know, in Chicano Park, and that was as a direct inspiration of the Mujeres Muralistas, as well as another group that went there from San Diego, that Yolanda Lopez. It was a group of her and some young students in high school that also painted another pillar there in Chicano Park in 1975. And then there was a whole group in Fresno that gravitated towards each other and were influenced and inspired by the Mujeres to start their own group and paint. And these were women from high school students and established artists that all got together to do that. So it's definitely an outgrowth of the inspiration that you guys, you know, gave to them to be able to do that on their own, and it spread beyond even the Bay Area, which I think needs to be acknowledged as well. So in a few minutes. So in a few minutes that we have left before we are going to open it up to Q&A, so you'll have a chance to they'll have a chance to answer some of your questions. But I didn't want to forget to ask about, because like I said, I don't want it to be frozen in the past. I want you to be able to talk to the audience and relate what you're doing now as artists, and, you know, to be able to talk about that as well. So whoever wants to start.
I continue to do art, but more personal work. I'm doing monotype prints and box constructions. So people give me a box, or I find it, and then I create a scenario within that box with found objects or things that I have in the house. And they're all symbols of the culture or symbols of women in struggle. Some of them are subtle, and others are not. I just got invited to the art gallery what street is that on? Also? Here in the city.
Art gallery, Priscilla. Art, yes.
The art gallery. There's a show coming up about liberty, and so I'm working on a huge box that has a lot of bullet casings.
What is it called?
The show is going to be called,
For one something.
no, it's going to be called, I forget. But anyway, it's a nice box, and I forgot the name of the show. But anyway, it's coming up, and I'm working with the objects or the pieces that represent our ironic freedom today, and that is, we all want to be free, but all of a sudden we have this president that's saying that we are all divided, So that's going to be what my box is about. So a lot of it has political connotations. And some of the paintings I don't paint anymore, but pretty much just monoprints at this point. And murals, I don't want to go up to the third story anymore. We have to repair the one at the mini park, but I'm going to go up to the first floor and then give the chart to a color chart to the young people to go up the second floor. Thank you.
Yes, working with the younger people is keeping me going too, and I love it. I learn from them, they learn from me, and that's the way it goes. I retired from teaching, like after 40 years of teaching, like from children to universities. That just paid for me to do my art, because that's always been my #1 thing. Anyway, so I've been working with mixed media, installation, painting, printmaking, both individual pieces and also collectively. I'm also negotiating, like for various book publications. I'm constantly working on my archives that are housed at Stanford, which is a pain in the ass. Currently an exhibit called Radical Women, Latin American Artists, 1960 to 85, at the Brooklyn Museum in New York. And also starting a project with the Smithsonian about baseball in the San Joaquin Valley. In particular, I'll be doing the women's softball. Hey. So I'm really interested in history right now. Maybe it's because I'm a Viona, I'm getting there. And so yeah, that's kind of what's going on, and begin collaborating a lot with young people. Because, we survived the 70s. They say if you lived in the 70s, what's the word? If you remember, you survived if you remember the 70s, you weren't there. So we kept saying to each other, I don't remember that. How do you say that? Who's that? Okay, young people take care of yourselves, okay?
I think when you asked this question, I came up with a blank page. The reason why I came up with the blank page was I just, the last couple of years I retired from a very strenuous occupation, which is working in medicine and corporate medicine. But I have to give them a shout out too. They are paying me now to stay at home and do artwork if I want to. So, and do whatever I want. So since I've retired, it's become sort of a blank page for me because I feel that I kind of needed to recover from working 31 years with this, organization, this corporate healthcare organization. But like I said, I gotta give them a shout out too. So I feel like I'm on a brand new sort of path to not only being an artist, but just being a citizen of the earth, which I feel I haven't had time to become that. So I'm like in the middle of actually organizing a trip with some of my sobrinos, some of my nieces and nephews that they really want to know about Mexico. They've never been there. And I'm really excited to take them to Mexico and to experience it because that was one of the things that I remember doing in the 70s and 80s was going to Mexico and experience that ancestral roots, that energy, whatever it is, it was just whoa. And I want to experience things like being in Mexico City when Goyoshalki was first discovered in 1978. I just remember, seeing actual living culture being unearthed. I remember being on the streets of Mexico City on Guatemala Street, and I was a cyclone fence, and just right below 8, 16, 12 feet below was Goyoshapi stone. Yes. And that was just, wow. It was just mind-blowing. And I have not really been back there since to actually see what they actually did with Goyoshapi. And I actually have a friend, one last thing. I have a friend that I had been working for doing images with Goyoshapi, and it was also mind-blowing to see her dismembered. You know, that was like, whoa, what am I going to do here? Took me almost 10 years to finally put her back together. I said, you know, I gotta put her back together, you know. Blank this, you know. She is now partially put back together at the San Francisco Women's Building mural. I don't know if you've been there. And she is now breaking out of the stone. And I have one more friend that told me, you're not done with Goyoshapi, you have to put legs on her. So I still have a lot of work to do, but like I said, right now, as far as doing artwork, I am kind of like feeling out this new path for me. I'm not sure where it's going, where it's leading, but I am open for it.
I just wanted to just say something really quickly. I'm also going to be in an exhibit with a couple of my friends, Lenore Chin and Nancy Hong, at the Art Gallery, and it's going to be, I guess, talking about the monster in the White House, sort of like our feelings and our angst. So just to put that out, that we're still peleando.
And just one more thing. The Maestra-Peace mural was done in 1994. A lot of women were, there was a lot of women dedicated. It was dedicated to a lot of women. And we're now in the process of actually publishing a book with Heyday Press. And so we are looking for contributions to help us make this happen. So I just want to shout this out to you all too, to get in contact with Heyday Press. And if you can donate, or I'm kind of involved in that now, but I just wanted to throw that out too. And I just wanted to shout out to Viva Paredes, who also helped us restore the mural at the mini park. She and Fabiola Cepeda had the guts that, I know so much of donuts that can help us, chingonas, to help us get up on the 3rd floor. Oh my God.
I'll still help you.
In 1980, I believe. Yes. She helped us restore the mural, the only mural that the Mujeres Muralistas is still in existence.
Okay, so now we come to the part where you get a chance to ask them questions. So unfortunately, we don't have microphones to pass around, so you can use your really loud voice when you ask it, and let us know who you want it directed to, or unless you want them all to respond. Yes.
Hi, it made a huge difference to me when the Mujeres Muralistas murals came into mission, because up until then, the guys' murals was all, they had a lot of black in them, they had fists, there was all protest, and life was miserable enough, and we knew what we were fighting against, but then suddenly there was all this joy and beauty and life affirmation and fruits and birds and
two of us competing for a job. And one of them was Ray Patlan and the other one was me. And when Ray Patlan came up with, he was from Chicago, and he paints like cicadas, and he's a beautiful painter. But all the students were oohing and awing him, and oh my God, he's beautiful. And when I came on and I started showing the murals of the women, everybody was booing me. The students were booing me. And I said, well, wait a minute, who do you think you are? I mean, you're just learning that the Maya's greater than zero. I mean, you're students. How dare you? I stood up on my soapbox and I told them all. And then I went home and I said, I lost the job. I was a bitch. I told them. So the phone rings at 7 o'clock at night. They had been in deliberation for 7 hours. And then they hired us both because they argued and decided that we were both as valid. But that's how tender it was for us as muralists or depicting women on murals was.
I think one of the really important things that I got out of it too was, for the most part, not completely, but a lot of what the guys were doing was rehashing the Mexican masters. And it was like we're all Aztec queens and princesses. Yes. But it was the Mujeres Muralistas sort of broke that. And they really depicted the community as it is. Again, the whole diaspora, the African, Latino, the Native American, a lot of the different groups that were really, they were living in the streets, like what people were saying earlier, but it was like they were not being honored and depicted. And so to me, that was like really refreshing, and I think that's kind of the feedback that we got, and especially the founders here. I thank them for that. But that was kind of what was fresh and real about it, is that it was a total reflection of our realities.
Just quickly, I just wanted to answer your question. Yeah, I think I might be open to a first floor mural. And I think there's a lot of young Chicana women artists that maybe want to participate and have somebody up there wants to raise their hand. And yeah, I think I might be able to maybe. But yeah, good idea.
Well, you and then you and then. Okay, let me go this side first. Now, where were you? Here. Okay.
Thank you.
Actually, there are two things I wanted to ask. I have a friend who's told me that San Francisco has more murals than any city she's ever seen around the world. I've seen some cities that have a lot of murals also. So I wanted to know if you were particularly rich with murals at this point. And secondly, I wanted to say that all the muralists that come to my mind now that are really well known are women. Susan Cervantes, Moira Caron, I can't remember the first name, Colleen Krutchner, but in San Francisco. So I feel like the climate for women muralists, some of them are world famous, I understand, has changed. Not necessarily, of course, all Latina, but there seems to be a lot more women muralists that are well known now. Very good.
Was that a question? Yeah. I think, Susan Cervantes was also part of our collective once we got going, and I have to, acknowledge her also. And she was, and still is, doing Priscilla High's mural center, and she's dynamite, and I was again very lucky to work with her again at the San Francisco Women's Building, the Maestra piece, and also got to know her better, and she's really a marvelous painter. I mean, really brought out the light in paint, which was wow, cool. But as far as, yes, there was probably a lot of, like I said, there was Emily Packard way before us, you know. Emily Packard was way before us doing murals, but she wasn't, you know, she didn't get the, you know, accolades or recognition as we as Mujeres Muralistas have gotten, you know. So I don't know about, I don't know if it's a question or.
Well, I just wanted to, if you thought that all muralists I can think of are, that I know in San Francisco, I know their works are women. And secondly, do we in San Francisco have more murals than any other place that you know of? Is it just particularly fruitful here for,
This Los Angeles.
Do you mean like, yeah, it's probably LA and the West Coast. Yeah. What I like about the walls and the mural and the public art that's going on is like really, really exciting because I live in the Mission. So every time I turn around, there's like there's a stencil art. And one of the most exciting places that I really, really love to go and see is what's called, I think, the public space, free speech wall, right there between 24th and 25th on Valencia. And it's like everything going on, whether it's somebody tagging their girlfriend's name or hating the new mayor or Rene Yanez or hating the techies. It's like fresh. It's just constant change. And it's on a wall, and it's very exciting. So, and then I really enjoy walking around sometime and seeing the young people like doing the spray can art. But of course, being who I am, I have to get in their face about wearing masks and all of that, because that's very, very toxic. So there's a lot going on all different levels. But sometimes I just like walking down the street and hey, there's a really cool goldfish, like somebody stenciled on the sidewalk. So it's like very lively. So it's much more than just the physical, permanent walls. It's like everywhere on like a lot of levels, and it's constantly changing.
I just wanted to say in terms of the San Francisco, LA, I mean in terms of numbers in the LAs and the sheer numbers, LA does have more murals, and now, especially more recently, through the work of SMART, the Social and Public Art Resource Center, Judy Baca, she's been pushing for having the city, you know, refund an art program that she actually started when she first started doing murals. She was the director of it. So in terms of that, but I think because San Francisco is much smaller, more concentrated, I think if it's more, there's more critical mass of murals in certain sections of San Francisco, but if you really look at the number, sheer volumes, LA still has more murals. And I think to your point, I think it's a direct link to the Mujeres Muralistas that now you do see, and you don't even think about it. It's like, oh yeah, another mural, a woman did it, no big deal. But I think that to me is a direct and is a testament to just how important the collective was, you know, to be able to just not, at that time it was not a given, and you heard stories, you know, they actually were not encouraged, you know, and there were some people, other women that were encouraging them, but not sort of the other muralists that were more prevalent at the time. So I see that as a direct connection and as a direct result of the work of the Mujeres.
Start us with the Dodgers, but Giants, please.
Too bad. Okay, we'll back over here to this side. You and then you.
This is more of an affirmation than a question, but that was exactly what I was going to say, that there's so many people that you all have influenced that you don't even know. I mean, I only know Patricia, but so many of the women, you know, who worked on the restoration of the women's building, there was a bunch of young women that worked on that, and we we talked about like legacy. We were talking a lot about how y'all did a lot of research to bring in like iconography and symbolism in order to like really represent the cultures, our culture, right? And I think you kind of answered this question was like, what symbolism or iconography or even trends do y'all feel that y'all brought to the forefront in order to begin to like represent our culture and kind of like start to become part of that conversation?
I would say for me, it's probably the feminist approach of making the woman central and going from there, the dialogue. It's always something that's been part of my art since I was a child. And I didn't really learn about feminism or anything like that until much later. But I learned it from my community and from my family. But to me, changing that, I think the Mujeres Muralistas really was part of that, changing that dialogue and giving first voice and a voice to the mujeres, especially the Latinas, and bringing up the issues that we confront that are different than the white women. So, yeah.
I think also just fortifying the culture and how important it is to us, and also for the community to learn about the heart or what's going on in the community, the politics, the culture, the colors, because in the 50s and 60s, if you did anything as bright as we think now, you wouldn't be accepted to a gallery or any place actually, because it would be considered folk art or it would be considered art at all. So I think it's really important for the education of the world to see that the culture has all this vibrancy and beauty.
And that women are central to that.
I think one of the first murals, and this is what we did, a little bit of it. I didn't know at the time, but I was really, I guess I was beginning to connect with La Tierra Madre, because a lot of my images, in the beginning it was about magueyes, it was about the corn, and it was about the sustenance that our Tierra Madre has given us. And so I think since then I've been offering up these images. And like I said, going back to Mexico was really, you really feel that grounding, that energy of, whoa, wow, you're not in California no more. But thank you for that question. I think that was great.
I was just going to add something. I remember research Irene said that stood out to me that's directly related, which was that looking around all the murals that were there at the time, it seemed like history only happened to men, and that there was no history. It was women were not part of that historical, the whole history or the narrative. And I thought that was such a powerful statement to make, because then the work that you do it, if you see it in that context, women, families are all very much a part of that history, and for the community to see that.
Just quickly, I think our ancient icons, maybe even current, have the other side, the dualities, and I've always been fascinated with that. So, and then going to Berkeley and all of that was like the mantra, question authority.
To your personal work as opposed to big public work or things like that, if you could tell me anything about that.
I can just say a few words. It was very important for us to bring out the femininity because we were getting so criticized. The guys would always say, well, yeah, it's about women. Can't you do anything interesting? They had just come back from Vietnam, so a lot of their murals were very warlike. Soldiers, people getting killed, Vietnam, the whole thing. And that's how they felt about their murals. But when we started ours, they really criticized that they were too feminine. We don't need to know about that, they're too weak, that kind of thing. But when we started explaining to them why we were doing the murals and how important it was that their children be taught that women are just as valid and more important because they're the educators of the family, it started lightening up, but not really. I mean, it took us a while. We're still working on it.
turned on to the hippies, and I became a hippie. And one of the really cool things I thought, especially coming like from a small little town and all of that, was the free sex type of a thing. And that concept, of course, contraception had been introduced, thank you. But that kind of opened up the whole dialogue about gayness and all of that, the hippie, and we were part of that. I mean, hey, we were part of the hippie movement, the Chicano hippie movement, okay? Santana, I mean, we could go on, but we're not going to out everybody. But I don't know, there was this real connection, there were all kinds of dialogues going on, and a freeness that really allowed us to explore ourselves and our sexuality. And it changed our lives, what can I say? It validated, well, we didn't need validation at a certain point, but it was the beginnings of just the freedom to be who you are. And so it was really, I'm very grateful to have sort of experienced that, especially coming from a rural Bible Belt conservative background with the biggest clan in the United States. So anyway, so that's my take on it. So I've done whatever I wanted. I'm a free spirit, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on that we have not touched.
But you don't remember.
I'm remembering. But yeah, that was a very interesting time, like as Ed was mentioning. And I did feel free. I did felt pretty free. And I think if I didn't feel that freeness, whatever it was, hippie or whatever, yeah, I remember all of that. Yeah, I think that was the spirit that kind of moved us into this, you know. And I was luckily at that time able to explore my sexuality, you know, and was able to move on besides, you know, what was prescribed at the time, which was heterosexuality. So I talked to my nephews and nieces about this time that I lived, you know, and he's just blown. One of my nephews is just totally blown away. Wow, Thea, you lived through all of that, you know. It's like, and survived, yeah, and survived. We didn't wear seat belts back in the day. The six-pack was in the front seat, you know, next to the driver. Whoever drove, it didn't matter. So, yes, it was wild. It was wild and free. And
Safe sex. Safe sex.
Safe sex? Not yet.
That was later. That was after AIDS. Then now we got serious.
That was in the 80s. I'm still stuck in the 70s. I still feel like I'm still stuck in the 70s as we're talking about the Mujeres Muralistas, but I can go on and on about too. Wow. Yeah. But I think in a way we were very fortunate, or I feel very fortunate to have lived this, you know, although I haven't quite got the whole historical, you know, boom thing, significance, there you go. And I'm still, whatever, you know, but I just feel really lucky to have experienced it, you know, and it's amazing, yes.
I think that's a good way to end it. So can we all thank our panelists,
My name is Olga Loya, and I found this very inspiring. I think they were brave to go against all the men, and they did a great job, and it's still continuing, and they're inspiring other artists, women artists, and I hope they continue forever.
My name's Luz Alvarez Martinez, longtime activist in the community. And I have been knowing all these women for many, many years. Patricia, Esther Hernandez, Irene. I've known them all for many, many years, and it was great to come here to see them. My name is Novell Armijo. I come from Santa Cruz, California. I met these women when I lived many years in San Jose, and I've been most proud to hear them now, 20 years later. It's been that long since I've seen some of them. Patricia Rodriguez and Esther Hernandez have been personal friends of mine, especially Patricia Rodriguez. So I know of her development and evolution and inspiration, and her vision, how her vision has crystallized and helped so many of us as adults, as young people. She continues to do this, and it makes me much prouder to understand what they were about in so many ways. Thank you.
So my name is Marcia Rincon Gallardo. I currently live in San Jose, and I'm so happy to have come to San Francisco to see these badass, chingona, Chicana muralists. What really attracted me to what they had to say was the way in which they were different about the colors, the images, the iconography of their murals compared to the men's murals of the time. And I learned a lot listening to them. I had so many more questions to ask, but I hope that we can still talk to them further in the future. Thank you.